within our schools. Having that experience, elementary, middle, and high, has really allowed me to continue to keep that focus, and so that's something that I continue to keep in mind. I also want you to know, I wanted to take a minute and, I do have to let you know that I do have a 13-year-old daughter who is with me. She'll be here with tonight, and my wife of 22 years. My daughter is here, and so she would be an 8th grader in Duval County Public Schools. So not only would I be the superintendent here, I would also be a parent and a community member. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my son. So I have a son that is, he is 18 years old. He's graduating this year. And so he's a senior. And so that's one of the reasons why right now is a unique opportunity for me and my family. And while we are looking to come to Duval, he's a senior. He'll be wrestling at and attending Virginia Tech in the fall. And so we're really excited for him, but a unique opportunity for us to really consider our next steps. And we've been very selective and intentional about this. And my wife and I, as we've looked at our next step, Duval County offers many things for us. It checks a lot of our boxes, which I'm happy to speak to in more detail as we go through the interview, but just really see this as a unique opportunity for us where we feel like, and I feel like I would be a great fit as the next superintendent. So I'm excited to talk to you about my experiences and my skills that I can bring to this work in Duval County Public Schools.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith. Our first question is going to come from our student representative from Riverside High School, Cameron Marshall. Cameron, start us off here today.
Good afternoon, Dr. Smith. My name is Cameron Marshall. I'm here on behalf of the JAGS program. I attend Riverside High. I'm a sophomore, and my first question to you today is, how do you plan on holding parents accountable to enforcing their kids to come to school every day?
Thank you, Cameron. I had the pleasure of visiting Riverside High School this morning, and so it was great to...
Generals.
There you go. I got to walk around and talk to some students, just hear about the incredible programs that are at Riverside, which sounds like are also across Duval County. So in terms of, I think one of your questions really getting to is around chronic absenteeism, and that's something that we have been faced in Loudoun County, where I'm at now, looking at our chronic absenteeism, helping our parents understand really how important it is that their child is at school every day, on time every day. And I think many of our parents don't understand the impact that that can have. I think, if I put on my parent hat, we always think, oh, well, they can make that up or they'll get that done, but we don't realize the negative impact that missing days from school and not being there for instruction, how that can impact their academic progress. And so I think one of our challenges is to make sure that we are clearly communicating with parents. We're letting them know what that impact is, and we're reaching all of our parents, not just the ones that are reading our newsletters, not just the ones that are paying attention to the information we send out. We're being very intentional and strategic to reach out to all of our families to make sure they understand the negative impact when their child is not at school. We want to be clear that if your child is sick, yes, there are times you need to keep your child home, but otherwise there's some real reasons why if your child wakes up and maybe they don't feel as well, but you feel like they can go to school, we want them in school and how we can support them there. So I think that's really important that we're communicating with our parents about that. I also think that as chronic absenteeism has emerged, as this is one of the key issues we're dealing with nationwide, there's a lot more research on it around what are some strategies that are really effective. So there's a strategy called nudging. I don't know if you've heard of nudging. And so nudging is where when your child is absent, we're going to nudge the parent to say, hey, did you know your child was absent today? If we don't hear back from them, we might nudge them again to say, hey, did you know this is some of the impact? We want to make sure your child is okay. And so different messages that we can use with parents to let them know that, hey, we missed your child at school today and we wish they were here. The other parts of the research will also tell you that parents really want to hear from their child's teacher. They trust their child's teacher. They want to hear from them about how the absence is really impacting them and what they need to do to improve that. And so those are a couple of the things that I would use. But again, there's a lot of research and emerging strategies that are coming out of this as we are all working to address chronic absenteeism in our schools.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next question is going to come from Aaron Lewis, and we have a series of questions in the area of personal leadership. So, Aaron, if you want to ask that first question in that category.
Good morning. My name is Aaron Lewis, and I am a parent. I represent 3 schools in the district: San Jose Elementary, DuPont Middle, and Wolfson High School. And my question is, could you provide examples of situations where you were faced with ethical dilemmas, and how did you navigate them while maintaining trust and respect among students, staff, and the community?
Thank you for the question, Ms. Lewis. I think that I always try to lead with my moral compass and thinking about what is right, what is best for our kids. And I think when I am challenged with a moral or ethical dilemma, I usually bring it to folks that I have around me, whether that be cabinet, where I've brought them situations to say, hey, we've got a situation, and I'm trying to think off one at the top of my head of a moral or ethical dilemma. One comes to mind for me where I had a situation at a high school where, frankly, I had the child of a school board member that was cheating. And so it was a tough decision and a conversation that I needed to have with I talked to the superintendent at the time. I worked through the situation. I talked through my supervisor to really make sure we were addressing it appropriately. It wasn't an easy conversation to have, but it was the right conversation to have. And I wanted to make sure that we were holding that child accountable just like we would any other child, and to make sure that we were doing that. And we did. It was the right decision. That board member was not happy at the time, but it was the right decision and something that we had to do. I think there's been other challenging situations that I've been involved with in terms of, attendance zones. So attendance zones are never fun in terms of how you have to address those, and I think it comes down to understanding and explaining the reasons why. So helping parents and our community and board members and staff understand here's the pros and the cons of some of these decisions, here's the benefits, and here's the drawbacks. And in the end, our board has to make that decision or those types of decisions around what is best, but it's our job to educate board members, our parents, and communities about those benefits and drawbacks. There's not many easy decisions as superintendent and leading a large school district. And so I think it is important that we really take the time to understand what potential impacts does this have. We need to talk to people with different perspectives so we can make sure we're considering any unintended consequences, because to make sure that we are making that right decision. I think sometimes we rush to decisions when we really don't have to rush, that we can take the time to make sure we listen to the voices in our community, that we listen to our kids, that we listen to our parents, that we listen to our principals, and other community members to make sure that we know what those benefits and drawbacks are so we can make the best decision for our kids.
Our next question comes from Lawrence Dennis.
Good afternoon, Dr. Smith. I'm Lawrence Dennis. I'm a happily retired principal and regional superintendent, Duval County Public Schools. I'm currently representing School Board District 1. My question is, describe a time when you noticed a decline in morale within a team or organization. How did you approach the situation, and what steps did you take to improve morale through active listening, gathering information, and involving others in decision-making?
Thank you, Mr. Dennis. So the example that I'll use is when I stepped in as superintendent in Loudoun County Public Schools. I came to Loudoun County Public Schools as a chief of staff. I was there for a little over 7 months when the superintendent was indicted by a special grand jury. And so he was fired at the time. My board came to me, asked me to step in as superintendent. And it was a very tough time for our community. And during my time as superintendent and from the very beginning, I knew we needed to rebuild trust with our community. And so one of the things that I did is I worked with our board to establish community listening sessions on each of the 9 districts in our community, to go out and listen to our community, to let them know that we were hearing them, and it would help us to guide our next steps in what we were doing. At the same time, I knew that our staff needed support, that our staff was feeling some of the pressure about some of the negative attention that was brought on our district. It was negative locally, and then it also caught some of the national spotlight. And so one of the things that I did was I created a superintendent's teacher advisory group, where each school was able to submit a representative and an alternate. And the reason we did an alternate just so we could have representation at each meeting. We then created a superintendent's principal advisory, and so there was a principal that was selected by the principals from each of their feeder patterns and their cluster groups. And then I had a superintendent's student advisory. And so that student advisory had 2 juniors and 1 senior on that group. And in each one of those groups, I was able to have frank conversations with those representatives to talk about what are some of the things that are going well, but in most cases, is more importantly, what are some things that we can get better at? What's happening in your day-to-day work that we can help you improve upon? Out of that, I found that the larger teacher group was just too big to tackle some of the issues that we needed to. So we did continue with that group, but I also created what I called an educator's cabinet. And it was 15 teachers at the elementary level, 15 teachers at the middle school level, and 15 teachers at the high school that I would meet quarterly with to talk about how we can improve morale and how we can improve the work that we're doing. Several great things have come out of that already. I will tell you, we presented on, we improved teachers' leave. So one of the things we heard from our teachers and staff was under our current policy, teachers could only take 3 days of personal leave, right? They wanted to be able to take 5 days of personal leave. Something small, but something that they really wanted to be able to do. If life occurs or something happens, they wouldn't need to be able to take a week. We wanted them to take 5 days of personal leave. So I worked with our CFO and our Chief of Human Resources to find ways that we could do that. And so we worked with the board to make a policy change to allow them to have 5 days of personal leave. We've also increased the number of stipends that we've asked for our teachers. We heard from our special education teachers and our Title I teachers about the struggles that they were having in their classroom and the things they were having to do above and beyond. And so we created a stipend for those teachers. So those are just a couple of things that came out of that work. There's many other things in terms of calendar and other items that we've done as a part of our advisory groups and a part of those cabinet groups. But when we noticed that we had this situation that hit our district and we knew that it was impacting morale from our teachers and staff, those are some of the things that we put in place and some of the actions that we took.
Much. Our next question comes from Florida's Principal of the Year, Dr. Michael George.
Good afternoon, Dr. Smith. How do you typically establish and communicate expectations for yourself and your team or organization? Can you share an example of a time when you had to hold yourself or others accountable for not meeting those expectations?
Congratulations, Dr. George. That's amazing. So yeah, in terms of expectations, I find that with our teachers, with our staff, with our entire organization, I do think by and large, we are all here for kids and we want to do what's best for kids. And when folks are not meeting expectations, I usually look to myself. Did I clearly communicate what those expectations are? Are we clear about what we are expecting to take place? And I'll use teachers as an example. Are we clear about what we expect to take place in the classroom every day? I know our teachers are working hard and they're doing the very best that they can. And so as a principal, if you go into a classroom and you don't see what you expect, is that because we haven't clearly communicated those expectations? Is that because we have not clearly communicated what the learning conditions that we expect and how we treat each other? Is it about how we communicate learning intentions and learning targets? Is it about how we engage our students and how we set up to have assessments and use that data? And so I usually look to myself. Did I clearly communicate that? And can I show that I clearly communicated, and I'll use instruction for an example, an instructional framework that says, here's the learning conditions and how do we get there? I then start to look for not only clearly communicating expectations, but have we built the coherence and competence to do that work? So not only have I communicated, this is what we expect, but have I talked to you about, and have we talked about, here's how we do the work, and have I built your competence and your skills so you have the capacity to do that work? And so I usually look at that through that lens of clarity, coherence, and competence when we're asking folks to do this work, that we're on the same page so that I'm not asking somebody to do something that they're not clear what that looks like, nor do they have the understanding of how it looks and have the skills in order to do that. And so, I have been in situations where as I've reflected on things to be able to say, you know what, maybe I haven't been clear. And so I'll use an example. With our principals last year, we had several Title IX incidents pop up. And I had a couple of principals that frankly did not report as as were expected, and I had those individual conversations, but as I reflected, I wanted to make sure I got in front of all of our principals to say, let me revisit this. I want to be clear with you. Here's where we are, and here's the expectations around reporting any issues of sexual harassment and discrimination. And so this is our process. I'm here to work alongside of you to report those, to make sure that you're following the process. And so I just revisit it, make sure that we're clear, and they had the understanding of how they need to do it, and they had the skills in order to do that.
Thank you very much. Next question will come from Tamara Roper.
Good afternoon, Dr. Smith. How do you define leadership, and what role does humility play in your leadership style? Can you provide an example of a situation where you demonstrated humility in a leadership role?
So, leadership. I believe that a true leader leads by example. That I believe that I would never ask anyone to do something that I wouldn't be willing to do myself. And I think in terms of, I think the leader needs to be the lead learner as well. That I need to be out front, and the leader needs to be out front, understanding here's how we need to continue to get better, and to demonstrate that they are a model of continuous improvement. I think the leader also needs to be able to own up and accept if we make mistakes, because we do make mistakes, and be able to accept that. And so I think those are some important attributes of leadership. I think in terms of humility, I'll share the example of, as I served as superintendent in Loudoun County, as we were going through the search process, I was asked by our board and many others to apply for the position. And I didn't apply for that position in Loudoun County because I wanted to focus on leading our district forward. We needed to rebuild trust. We needed to fix and change some of our structures and systems. We needed to have clear communication and being transparent with our community, and that's where I needed to focus my attention. I didn't want to get distracted on any of the other things going on with the superintendent search. And I think we did a really good job of that. And every time that it continues to get brought up by our current superintendent, it's now set him up for success, I continue to point back to our team. Because as any good superintendent knows, it's not necessarily the actions of that one individual. It's how you surround yourself with good people, you provide them with clear expectations and support to do the work, and you're doing the work together as a team. I am very much a collaborative leader. That's what I bring to this work. That's what I've always been in terms of being a principal and coming to this work. I don't pretend to know it all. I try to surround myself with good people, and I need to say, when I don't know the answer, I'm going to go and find it out. And I'm going to research it, and I'm going to talk to the best minds around this, and I'm going to try to bring it back to our team so our team can do this work. And so education is not something we do in isolation. We have to work together, we have to be a team, and we've got to own it as a team as well.
Thank you very much. And now, Andrew Lodge.
Good afternoon, Dr. Smith. My name is Andrew Lodge. I'm a music teacher here at San Mateo Elementary, also a 2023 Teacher of the Year finalist. My question for you is, can you describe a time when you had to address a controversial issue within a school board or community setting? How did you approach the situation, and what strategies did you use to build consensus among diverse stakeholders?
Thank you, Mr. Lodge, and congratulations. Thank you for your service to our kids. Controversial topics or controversial issues. I think, let me think. I think there's been a number of situations where we don't always agree, and I'm trying to pinpoint one of those for you here right now. I meet with our board members every week, and I talk with them one-on-one. We have an agreement that there's no surprises and that we'll work together on anything that may come up. And so I'm trying to think about, there's been lots of times where we don't agree and we have to continue to work on solutions, how we can work on what are some potential solutions for our kids and our community. Where's a big one that we do not agree? I will say, tomorrow night, we have a school board meeting tomorrow night, right? And so I was helping to get ready for that. And I think that there's going to be, one of the things that we have worked on is changing our calendar for next year. And so there are times some folks that want, calendars are never usually very popular. Everybody wants to start late, and we want to get out early, and we want to have a long winter break in between, and spring break. So we know that you can't accomplish that with what the code requirements in terms of the number of days, but we are trying to work on situations when we've got a situation where our teachers are, the amount of training that's being required by I'll just say the state of Virginia, is incredible, and it's not feasible. And so we have been trying to work with our teachers, and I've been working with our board and our principals on how are we going to really tackle this. We already have a teacher shortage that we're facing. We can't continue to add things to individuals' plates. And as I have, as we were initially presented some ideas to our board, there was some disagreement about how we should approach this and what we should do, and the funds that we should allocate to it. And so for me, it's been going out to our community and having that conversation with our community. I've gone out and talked with our principals, listened to them about what our principals think. We've brought it to our superintendent advisory groups to listen to what they have to say. And now I'm able to come back and bring back a recommendation about how we should move that forward with data and supports behind it. And we're going to propose some adjusted arrival days so we can give our teachers time. So we're going to give them 32 hours over the course of the year to be able to create time. It's very difficult to create time, but it's going to be one of our ideas to be able to share with our board that was not popular about changing the calendar. Many of our parents and community did not, we approved calendars 3 years in advance, so they did not want us to change the calendar for next year that's already been approved, but we really have to do some work to understand the why and how important it is, even though your child might not come to school until 2 hours late, how that impacts the training for the teacher so the teacher can be their very best, so the teacher can understand what they need to teach the kids and how we can make sure that happens effectively and how that's going to end up impacting their child in the long run. So I hope everything goes well on tomorrow night at our board meeting as we present that, but that's one of the most recent issues where we have not had agreement. We've had to come to consensus.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to move to the area of fiscal responsibility and efficient business operations. And we're going to start with Trey Saar.
Good afternoon, Dr. Smith. As I'm sure you know, the district passed a sales tax surtax a couple of years ago to help renovate and rebuild a number of school facilities. At the same time, the cost of construction has skyrocketed and enrollment has declined more than previously expected, meaning that the district is not able to build everything that was promised in that sales tax campaign, and has begun to float the idea of potential school closures instead. Can you describe how you would evaluate the district's facilities plan given these challenging circumstances and ensure thoughtful use of district capital and sales surtax funds while addressing the community's growing concerns?
Thank you for that question. I've read a little bit about this in terms of some of the things taking place, and I do think the actions of the board to hold 7 community meetings is the right steps. I know they're going to host community meetings from now, I think it's May 21st to June 20th, to have 7 community meetings to listen to our community, because I think that's really important. It's a tough situation, as I understand it. I'm not going to pretend to understand it all because I'm not here, I'm not immersed in the work at the moment. But as I understand it, and as you described, it's really tough in that you went out for this this tax increase, promised a lot of things, and now because of things that were out of our control around construction and costs and the inflation and then the decrease in enrollment, we're now in some of these situations. And so I do think going out to the community and listening is the right choice. I think we need to be clear and explain why we're in this situation, and I think we need to come up with some potential options. And I would want to work side by side with the board to be able to explore those options, to be able to understand, why they may be options, what are the benefits and drawbacks to each of those, that we could publish those in an amount of time so that our community can give input on those options. But I think the root of that is we have to help the community to understand why we're in this situation, and that not doing anything and just staying still is not a solution. That we're going to have to make some decision, but we really need to understand what are the benefits, what are the drawbacks, what are the unintended consequences of some of these decisions. And I think as we look through that lens across a couple different options that we have, I think it will help us to make the right decision. I don't know what the right decision is but I do think the steps that the board is taking to listen to the community, to come back and have some thoughtful conversation around this is the right one.
Thank you very much. And now Rachel Fortune for the next question.
Excellent, thank you. Hello, Dr. Smith. I am here today representing District 1 and serve as the president of the Jacksonville Public Education Fund. How do you incorporate data analysis into your decision-making process to improve operational efficiencies within the district? And can you provide examples of how you've used data to evaluate and revise procedures, plans, processes, systems, or policies to drive improvement?
Thank you for that question. I think in terms of data, I will say, I think data-driven decision-making just needs to be a part of our culture. And I don't know whether that's a part of the culture here or not, but in my work, it is a part of us looking at data on a regular basis to inform our decision-making. And that starts at the cabinet level. I've led and facilitated and been a part of several data conversations where we look at data from across our district, whether it's the amount of, if we recently took a look at our school nutrition services and the number of meals that we were serving, how we were allocating staff, which schools were serving more meals than others, why that might be the case, and we were kind of trying to do a root cause analysis around that. I also think that data-driven decision-making needs to be a part of the daily work in our school, and I've read some things about the work around professional learning communities in our schools, and that cycle really has to lend itself to talking about what do we want our kids to know, how are we going to know if they've learned it, that's around the instruction and assessment piece, but then what are we going to do for the kids that don't respond and the kids that have learned it? And that's where the data piece comes into play, where we've got to look at data to inform what interventions are needed for which kids, and which kids are ready to move on to the next level or to the next assignment. And so I do believe that data analysis needs to be a part of, like I said, our daily decision-making. As superintendent and our cabinet and our leadership needs to understand our data, we need to be able to demonstrate that we are leading with that data. With our calendar conversation, we're going to be sharing data from our community with our board around that. And so, I think another example that I'll quickly share, that as superintendent, I instituted a new communication platform. We did not have a good way for constituents, for parents, for our community to contact the district or board members. And so we instituted a new client communication system that allowed me as superintendent to not only monitor what are some of the emerging trends and themes and data that's coming up, but also it had accountability measures built in. So what I could see, if the Department of Business and Financial Services, if they weren't responding to parents and to inquiries in a timely manner, I would know that. And so our cabinet looks at that on a quarterly basis to see where we are, and are we following up and having that consistent feedback and having that consistent communication with our community, because that's one of the things as superintendent coming in that I noticed that we were lacking and that I wanted to change. So that's just another example that we've used data at our cabinet level to make sure that we were being responsive and accountable to our community.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fortune. Thank you, Dr. Smith. The next question will come from Felicia Gaines.
Good afternoon. Felicia Gaines. I'm District 4 representative, and I'm also the chair of the Jacksonville branch of the NAACP Education Committee. My question is, how do you prioritize and allocate resources to ensure that schools in under-resourced areas receive the attention and support they need to accelerate student achievement? Can you provide examples of specific initiatives or programs implemented to address the unique challenges faced by these schools?
Thank you, Ms. Gaines. Good afternoon. So in terms of, I refer to this as differentiated support. So this is about how do we look at our school improvement processes, and I think understanding our school improvement processes, working side by side with our principals and their leadership teams to understand where they're doing well and where they need to improve. And that is also, I'll take a step back, it is our central office, understanding that our role as central office is to support our schools. That's our number one goal, and that's what we need to be doing each and every day. And so a part of our school improvement process should include central office staff meeting with principals to understand how they're doing, what resources they need to do the work, what barriers we can remove. In some cases, that does mean additional resources. And so, as an example, I will share last year, as superintendent, I was working with one of our Title I middle schools that was really struggling. And we had gone out and met with the school, we were reviewing their data to see where they were, and we recognized that they needed some additional support with our English language learners. And then they also were having a number of issues with discipline in the building. And so I worked with the principal to understand what they've done and where they're at. And then we also allocated additional resources. So I was able to work with our English learner division to provide them an additional teacher and a paraprofessional there. And then we were also able to work with our division of safety and security to provide an additional safety resource officer, not safety security officer, which is it's an in-house security officer for us, that we could provide some of that support. At the same time, we had our Office of Positive Behavior Intervention Services, PBIS, that we went out to the school that helped the principal to do an audit of what are some of the things that are going well and how could they improve their proactive approach to discipline and behavior. So we also provided some professional learning for the English learner department for the teachers that were in those classrooms that were struggling the most. And so that's just a quick example of how I believe our school improvement process and frankly our school rating process in terms of accountability should drive the differentiated support that we are giving our schools. One of the other things that we've done in my school division that I'm in now is we have built staffing standards around that. So what that means is that for any Title I school that's a middle school, we now have a staffing standard that says they get X number of English language learner teachers above and beyond what a regular school would give, and it's a different ratio. And so we also have allocated them an additional assistant principal to provide instructional leadership and support there. So there's a couple of different ways that we address that. One was immediate support, and then we went back and also made some changes for the upcoming budget cycle to support staffing standards.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to move to the area of working relationships, and we're going to start with Dr. Constance Hall, a former school board member. Dr. Hall.
Good afternoon. Dr. Smith, how do you approach building and maintaining relationships with the school board and community members? Can you provide examples of how you fostered trust, openness, and honesty in your interactions with these stakeholders?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Hall. I would say, so in terms of relationships with board members, I'm going to take these a little bit differently in different situations. So in terms of board members, coming in as superintendent, I felt like it was, when I took over in Loudoun County, I felt like it was really important that I have ongoing communication with our board members. And so I met with our board chair and vice chair every week, and then I met with the entire board in one-on-one meetings every other week. I've continued that practice over the past year and a half, and I just met with each board member individually on Thursday and Friday of last week. And I think that's really important to continue to have that open communication and conversation. They also know that I'm available, and most board members, I will speak with probably at least half of our board every day, just to keep them informed, to keep them up to speed on here's some of the things going on, here's some of the things that they're working on, and then of course they contact me to tell me some things that are going on as well so that we can be on the same page. And I've just found that over time that has helped to really develop a strong and trusting relationship. I'm somebody, I think you'll get to know, that I'm very upfront, very honest. I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm very transparent in my communication. And our board members understand that as we get to know each other and trust each other more. So that's been really beneficial for us. I think as a part of my entry into this, being the superintendent at Loudoun County too, I also was able to work with our cabinet, and I had some key community members that I worked with to develop an entry plan that says, as I enter as superintendent, who are the individuals that I really need to meet with, that I really want to talk to, so I can know who are those key stakeholders, who are those key community members. And that was a great process. I will say, as a result of one of those processes, I met, his name was Reverend Dr. Milam, and he was the executive director of a group that we had called the Interfaith Bridges Group. And that Interfaith Bridges Group represented all faiths, religious denominations in our county. And I worked with him to bring together, he had an idea, actually, it was his idea that he brought with him from Michigan, of bringing together elected leaders and bringing together our principals. And we had an opportunity that we worked in each one of our districts with each of our principals, each one of our board members, to bring together folks just to talk about our community. And we talked about, here's some great things going on in our community. We ate lunch together, and we then each shared one of the good things that were going on in our community. As time grew on, we made it through each one of the districts, we were able to start to talk about some of our challenges and how we can work together to support one another as a community. And that relationship and that bond with those community members and those organizations provided to be very fruitful, and many relationships were formed at the school level where they were able to support with school supply drives, or they had a need and something came up at the school. And so it was pretty impactful to have that, to have those relationships. And so that's one example of how I've done that. The other example that I would share is that when I came in as superintendent in Loudoun County, there were some pretty contentious relationships between we have a board of supervisors as a county instead of a city council, and the elected sheriff and the county executive. And I reached out. I went over to them to meet with them one-on-one, to have those conversations. And I think if you would talk with any of them now, and they've come out and said publicly about how I helped to rebuild that trust and that relationship, it has helped to further our school district and our work as a community in many ways. And so I'm one of those folks that I don't have too much of an ego. I'll come in and meet you at your place. We'll have a conversation. Let's talk about how we can work together to support the needs of our kids in our community.
Thank you very much. Dr. Heipel.
Good afternoon, Dr. Smith. I'm Argel Hipol, biology teacher at Westside High. I'm also an exchange teacher from the Philippines. Sir, may you please describe your involvement in the community and how you advocate for the needs of students, teachers, and their families? And can you please share examples of successful partnerships that you've built to support program initiatives that extend beyond traditional classroom settings?
Thank you, Dr. Heipel, and thank you for your service as well. So I think this question gets at two key areas, and I did hear some around climate and culture, so I want to talk to that first, and then I'll speak to the partnerships piece as well and community involvement. I do think, and I think there's probably some questions coming around human resources and how effective educators in a minute, but I do think climate and culture, it has to be our number one recruitment and retention strategy, that we've got to really focus on the climate and culture of our school district, the climate and culture of each and every one of our schools. And there's several ways that we can do that I'll touch on in the later question. But I do think that as the leader, I've got to model that. I've got to model how we respect each other and how we can have that conversation. I've got to model how I expect us to establish those learning conditions for each one of our schools and each one of our classrooms. I'll also say, as we think about partnerships, most of my experience around partnerships involves trying to create relevant learning experiences for our kids. Relevance is something, I think if you look at the research and kids that are connected to schools, it's pretty high at the elementary and it kind of fades as they get into middle school and high school. And so even when as a principal, one of the things that I was very passionate about was around relevance. How can we make sure that kids understand why they're learning something and how it's going to help them in school? And so a couple of partnerships that I will mention. First, as I was superintendent in Loudoun County, I worked with our Chamber of Commerce, and as a result of that, I started to work with a group that we called our CEO Cabinet. And so they have a CEO Cabinet in Loudoun County that represents the CEOs from many of the large corporations and organizations. I was an ad hoc member of that group and was able to really work side by side with that group. And what that group did was they were able to say, what are the top 3 things that we want to focus on this year? And this was everything, and education was a small piece of it. Working with them, we were able to get them to identify, working with us to create what we've called a senior capstone project for each one and every one of our kids, that was one of their priorities. And we were to work with the CEO Cabinet. They funded a part-time position as a coordinator for this. They also supported us with commitments in terms of connecting each one of our seniors with a senior capstone experience. the situation that we had at the time is we had some students that were doing a senior capstone experience, and it was usually one of those that had a parent that connected to an organization or a business, or some that had the means or know-how. We wanted to make sure, and I wanted to make sure, that we had that senior capstone experience for every single one of our students, regardless of their background, regardless of their disability, regardless of what they're interested in, we can connect them with something. And so I really worked with the Seeking Code Cabinet to get that off the ground, so we could establish it at each one of our high schools. So that's one example. I'll share another example. In Virginia Beach, we worked very closely with our military. And so, as I said, similarly to here, had a lot of military families. We were great partners with Oceana Naval Air Station. And one of the things we were able to work out with Oceana, we had this grand idea of a STEM day. And so it came to fruition where we had every single one of our fifth graders came to Oceana Naval Air Station on a STEM day, where they got to have these hands-on activities. We had thousands of fifth graders running around with teachers, just had an amazing experience for them to see how learning was relevant, what they were learning in their fifth grade classroom, how that was relevant to them. So that's two examples. And one other one that I would share is that recently I've partnered with several of our local higher ed institutions. So we're next to George Mason University, and we have our North Virginia Community College. And we have partnered with both of those organizations to we created a lab school that was focused on, it's called Access Academy, and it's really focused on employability skills. And so we made the application to the state in order to do that, and that is now getting off the ground. And so we're really excited about that partnership as well with our higher ed institutions. And so those are a couple examples of the partnerships that I've helped to lead in my work.
Thank you very much. And now, Ashley Watkins.
Hi, good afternoon. I am a teacher at J. Allen Axon Montessori, which is an elementary school, and I'm also the 2023 Teacher of the Year finalist. My question is, how do you stay informed about challenges faced by teachers on a daily basis? And can you give examples of strategies you've recommended or implemented to support and celebrate teachers and classroom successes?
Thank you, Ms. Watkins, and thank you for your service. So I think some of the ways, I've mentioned a little bit about how I make sure I stay in touch with what's happening in our classrooms is one is the advisory committees that I share, the superintendent's teacher advisory and the educators cabinet. They are different in size, and the one has about 15 and the other has over 100, but we were able to work as a group to understand what are we doing well and what are our real challenges. And so as those groups identified challenges, I was able to bring in resources, and I bring in members of our cabinet and members of our staff to hear about some of the needs that we have and for us to co-design solutions together. And so, so that's one of the ways. I think the other way is I will tell you when I stepped out of the classroom to be an administrator, and especially when I stepped out of being a principal out of a school, I was hesitant. I didn't want to get away from kids. And I have made it my priority to make sure I'm in schools on a regular basis, so that I'm in schools, I'm in classrooms, I'm seeing what's taking place, I'm talking with our teachers and staff, I'm talking with our principals so that I can make sure that I can stay in touch. And so when we are making decisions, we need to make sure we're consulting and talking with teachers and our principals, but also I need to have that in my thinking at the same time. And so, I did make it my priority that I visited every one of our schools, so that all of our 100 schools, so that I was in those classrooms, that I was there. And so that would be my priority here as well, is to have, I would be in those schools, get to know those schools, get to know some of their challenges, so that I can do some data analysis myself to see what are those patterns and themes that are across our district, so we can identify what we need to do. I would also create several of those advisory groups that I mentioned, because I think it helps me to make sure that I'm staying in touch with what are the real issues. We can do a lot of things that sometimes we think that are helping that are probably not helping. And so I think it's really important that we make sure that we stay in touch. And so that's a couple of examples.
And now, Reagan Copeland.
Hello, I am here representing District 7 and also lead the school district's Parent Academy program, as well as other parent engagement projects and initiatives. My question for you today is, can you please provide examples of your experience with legislators, government officials, nonprofit organizations, and business partners to enhance educational opportunities and promote economic development. How have these collaborations impacted the educational landscape?
Thank you, Ms. Copeland, for that question. And I got a packet in my hotel room last night that had the whole Parent Academy booklet, so thank you for that. It was great to see all the offerings that we have, so thank you for that.
Good job, Reagan.
So I talked a little bit about business partnerships earlier, and so I'm going to start with the legislators piece. So in my current role, I do serve as the legislative liaison for our school district, and so I do work closely with I work with some of our federal delegation, but it's more with our state delegation. I have a personal relationship with each of our delegates and our senators and their staff, and it's a year-round relationship that we have, and it takes time to develop. It usually is not developed in session, it's developed outside of session when we can have those relationships. And so I've been intentional about that and setting up those times to talk, to understand, so that they can understand the needs of our district, and so that we can be their go-to source when things on education come up, so that we can be the ones that they can come to and say, what's going on, how would this impact you? And so I do meet with each of them. I send them regular updates. I also lead our district in creating our legislative program and our legislative priorities, so we can identify, here's what's important to us, and then being able to equip board members when they go and speak with legislators, as we set that up with talking points on how they can further our work around those legislative priorities. During session, I work with them we monitor the subcommittee and the committee agendas, and so we can provide feedback. I will tell you, the situation that I'm in now, one of our current delegates was a former board member that I worked with, and so we have a very close relationship, and she serves on the K-12 subcommittee. So it's a very good relationship that we have, so that we are the experts. I am the one that she reaches out to say, hey, how would this really impact you? And a quick example was in Virginia, they were considering using PE or using the PE credits to waive that credit for JRTC students. And so we were able to have an in-depth dialogue, especially from a secondary perspective, around how are you going to schedule health and not schedule PE. And so it sounds good on face value, but when you think about our students still need health. There's a lot of health standards that we still have to teach. There was actually some new ones that were adopted in Virginia this year, but those are skills that our students really need, and it really is logistically difficult if you remove the PE component without the health. So I don't want to get into those weeds, but that's just one example where they reached out, and we were able to have that conversation and amend the bill, and really it was just a should or shall into a may in a bill, which gave us more flexibility to be able to do what we need to do in our district. And so I do lead that work with our legislators, and I'm also the liaison with our staff to talk with staff. I'm not the resident expert on everything, so be able to go back out to our staff to say, how would this bill impact us? It's also where I work with staff to be able to say, what are some things that we need help with in the legislature, and how do we want to start those conversations really now for the next legislative session to say, here's some things that we want to see take place. So in Virginia, we're leading some work around, in my district, around the literacy requirements for higher ed. It's not very popular at higher ed, but we want higher ed to have some audits around how they're teaching our teachers to teach reading. Because when they're coming to us, they're not adequately prepared, and we're having to retrain them and reteach them. And so that's one example of the work that we're leading right now to draft a bill for the next legislative session and work with our delegation to support that work.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, now Carolyn Davis.
Hello, Dr. Smith. I'm Carolyn Davis, and I'm here today as an elementary principal representative. What innovative strategies have you employed to attract and retain effective and diverse teachers, staff, and administrators? Can you share examples of successful implementation of these strategies and their impact on the organization's workforce, diversity, and effectiveness?
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Thanks for your leadership. So in terms of recruitment and retention, the shortage around educators has been growing and growing, and we know that we've got to be intentional, and we've got to look at some new ways if we're going to really solve this problem. And so one of the things I mentioned earlier around climate and culture, we've got to create a climate and culture where people want to be in DCPS, that they hear the great things that we're going on and want to be a part of our team, that they want to be a part of our work. And so I do think climate and culture is our #1 recruitment and retention strategy. That said, I think there's some other things that we can and should do. And so one of the things that I did in Loudoun County is talk with our educators. We need to know what they value. We need to talk with our bus drivers around what they value and our other staff around what they value. Recently, I will share that we talked with I had a conversation with some of our bus drivers. We've started to call these chief chats, and we had these conversations with small groups to talk about how things are going and how they want to get better. During one of these chief chats, the bus drivers talked about, we need to have more personal leave, and I referenced this a little bit earlier. And so that really originated with our bus drivers to talk about leave, and so we have to shift what we're thinking in terms of recruitment and retention, that it's not always just about compensation. We've focused on compensation in my district for a while, but now we've started to shift that to, yes, we need to look at compensation, and we've done a lot of work around compensation, but we've also found that after getting a raise, after the next couple of months, it kind of wears off, and you're kind of like, what's next? And so we've started to look at other benefits. And so personal leave is one thing that we've looked at. We also instituted a new parental leave policy. We heard from our employees around parental leave and their needs to support their young children and their babies, and so we did institute a new parental leave policy. We're the only one in our region that has that policy, and that has attracted a number of our teachers. The other example that I'll share with you around recruitment and retention is, and it goes back to climate and culture, is by listening to our teachers, and I shared the example earlier of the calendar. I think by our teachers know that when I listened to them, and we found a way that we're going to present again tomorrow night around our calendar to give them more time. They need more time. I heard time and time again from our educators that we need more time. We just don't have enough time. And so thinking about another way to give them time lets them know that we're listening to them, that we value them. And so I think that goes a long way, and that's another way that we've done that. One other thing that I'll share around recruitment and retention that we are working on, we have identified areas where that's more difficult to hire than others. So for us, it has been primarily in early childhood special education. It has also been in our Title I schools, and then it's also been around, there's some specific special education programs and endorsements where we need help. And so we have, for this upcoming year, we've instituted retention and hiring bonuses for those positions. So, and they're stackable bonuses and retention bonuses, where if you're in a Title I school and you're a special education teacher, you get both of them. If you're a new teacher, you would get all three. And so hearing that, we wanted to put those into place. And then the last thing that I'll mention, one more, is around growth and development. I think that a key retention strategy has to be that we want each and every one of us needs to continue to get better, and that we've got to provide the structures and the supports to do that. And so one of the things that we are working right now, we saw another district doing it, and we're trying to steal some of the things they're doing, is around career ladders. That there's some things that we can do around career ladders with specializations and certifications that for some of our best teachers, they want to stay in the classroom. They want to continue to teach kids, but they want to also improve in terms of their level of pay and their level of specialization. So we're working on plans to be able to institute career ladders so we can keep some of our best folks in the jobs that they love, and they're so passionate about, by also respecting them for that work and looking at specializations for career ladders. So that's a couple of examples and things that we've been working on and that I've led around recruitment and retention.
Thank you very much. We're right on schedule. We actually have about 25 minutes left for questions. We have 8 minutes, 8 questions left, and then that would leave 5 minutes for Dr. Smith to wrap up. So I just want to keep everybody in mind on the time. And we're going now to the area of instructional leadership, and over to Vontrina Myers.
Greetings, Dr. Smith from the middle
Hi.
school region. I am the middle school assistant principal at Ocean Way Middle School, and my question is as follows. What are strategies that you have recommended or implemented to reduce teacher turnover within your school or district? How do you demonstrate appreciation for the role and the responsibility of being an effective teacher, and support the professional growth and well-being of educators?
Thank you, and thank you for your leadership and service as well. I think in terms of when I think about recruitment and retention and really just showing appreciation, I think it depends on, I don't know if you've ever read the book around the love languages and how we each like to receive appreciation. Everybody's a little bit different. And so I think that, to me, that speaks to, we need to know our teachers, we need to know our staff, and we need to know how they like to be appreciated. And as a principal, I did that work with my staff. We went through the little exercise to understand each other, so that I can know how each one of them likes to be appreciated, and whether it was that little note as I walked through the classroom about something they were doing well, or if that was calling them out in a faculty meeting that I know they like to be recognized in front of their peers. Getting to know each one of the folks that worked with me was really important to me, and I think that they also showed that I valued them, and so that was really important. I think the other thing that comes with this and that I've seen is around feedback. And what I have found is around when we start to think about feedback as a part of the coaching cycle, some of our best teachers, all they want is some productive feedback and some effective feedback around, yes, that's great, I know I'm doing a great job here, but how can I really get better? And I think when we can give them that feedback, that also, again, shows that we care about them and we want them to continue to get better. It is about growth, and it is about each one of us trying to get a little bit better. And so I know some of our best teachers, they just want some consistent and timely feedback about their work so they can get better. I know we just had Teacher Appreciation Week last week, and so we did a number of things in our district, but around recognizing, celebrating our teachers and educators. But really, I think it's something that, at least in my district, we try to spread throughout the year. It shouldn't just be 1 week a year. We need to raise the awareness of the work of our teachers and our staff every day, and that if without education, without teachers, no other profession exists. If we don't know how to read and do math and we don't know how to learn, no other profession exists. And so, my respect for teachers goes above doctors who do incredible work, but without teachers, we're not really able to have an educated workforce and educated community. And so I think that we need to find ways each and every year to do that. I think that comes within the budget process, and how we prioritize teachers, and but then also how we listen to teachers, as I've shared in a couple of examples, how we listen to teachers throughout the year to understand their needs and know that we're working alongside of them in the trenches every single day to support their work.
Thank you very much. Dr. Norfleet.
Hi, Dr. Smith. I'm Wendy Norfleet with District 7, also with 2 kids in public schools. So can you share examples of how you've led improvements in overall student achievement within your school or district, particularly in terms of closing gaps in learning and access? And what specific initiatives or interventions have you implemented to address these challenges?
Thank you, Dr. Norfleet. So in terms of achievement and closing gaps, I'm going to go back for a second to what I shared earlier around clarity, coherence, and competence. And I think that really applies to when we think about instruction and high-quality instruction, that we need to be clear about what our instructional model looks like. What do we expect to happen in every classroom every day? Understanding that it varies elementary to middle to high school, but there's key instructional components that we have to identify and best practices that should be happening in every classroom every day. And so I've led that work where I'm at now around what we've called an instructional framework that will clearly identify what are the learning conditions that should be present. What do we do before instruction? How do we set the purpose for learning in terms of clearly communicating with students about what they should learn about and in student-friendly language? It also talks about how do we engage students. When we talk about student engagement, what does that mean? What does student engagement look like? How do we talk with teachers about it? How do we talk with students about it? It also gets into how do we ensure that students are being metacognitive? How they're thinking about their thinking? How they're assessing their own learning? And then how are we, when we talk about assessment, what's our expectations of assessment? So I think it is that clarity of an instructional model across the district that I find sometimes limits our ability to have high quality learning, but also impedes our ability to have consistent professional learning across the district to improve the work of our teachers. So I would say that is first and foremost. In my current district, like I said, I've been leading some of that work around an instructional framework. As superintendent, we really worked around our multi-tiered systems of support model. And so this is the intervention model where we can identify to see how well our instruction is working and which students need more help and which students are ready to move on. And so we've integrated, and I'll call it MTSS, we've integrated that MTSS model. It goes into our student information system now, and so we're able to include data in our student information system, and where we work with our teachers and staff to have regular conversations about the students and their achievement data. And when we're having regular conversations around that data, we can identify, all right, these students are really getting it, these students are really struggling, and let's look at how those students are struggling, which interventions are most appropriate. And so within our MTSS module, we've been able to look at the research and which interventions are appropriate based on what are the deficits that we're seeing. And we work with our teachers about, all right, maybe we need to do some other groupings around the needs of our students. And so really looking at that MTSS module has been really helpful for us, and it's really allowed us to raise achievement. For example, I'll say with one of our focus areas in Loudoun County was our students with disabilities. We were seeing achievement gaps there. Last year, we made substantial gains. We grew as a division over 4 percentage points, and we further distanced ourselves from the state. We're now exceeding the state by 22 points with students with disabilities in writing. And so that's been something we've been really, really focused on and really want to make sure that we want to do well. A part of that was also looking at our inclusion model and supporting our special education teachers and how they do inclusion, how we plan together and work together. I'll say we've also seen improvements in our mathematics scores, and as a result of our work focused on MTSS and focused on that collaboration through a professional learning community, that cycle of understanding what do our kids need to learn, how are they going to learn it, and what are we going to do if they respond and don't respond. We were also able to improve our math subgroups across the board, and we're now leading the state by over 7 percentage points in mathematics. And so we've seen real gains in that work, and we're excited about how within a new instructional framework, which we will be rolling out in our district, that will help to align clarity around what we want students, what should be taking place in our classrooms every day, that will further include how we develop and build their capacity to have that competence to do that work. I think our gains will continue to increase. The other last thing that I'll mention around this topic is, as a high school principal, I was at 3 different high schools, and in each one of those high schools, one of our big focus areas was on graduation rate. And so I will share at Kellum High School, when I went in, their graduation rate was near the bottom of the district, and I was able to work with our students and staff around academic and career plans and intervention plans and creative scheduling and opportunities for students. And we then surpassed our district, and we led the state with about a 96% graduation rate. And I was able to replicate that at another high school when I went to Lake Braddock Secondary School, where we were able to make incredible gains and up to 97% in graduation rate. So I've done some of that work in closing some of those gaps at the high school level as well with graduation rate.
Thank you very much. And now, Rebecca Campbell.
Hi, good afternoon. I am Rebecca Campbell, and I was the 2023 Employee of the Year for the district, but that same year I transitioned to teaching business education for career technical programs, and that's why this question's so near and dear. How do you promote and implement career technical programs and non-traditional pathways for students who may not be attending college? Can you provide examples of successful programs or initiatives that you've introduced to provide diverse educational opportunities for all students?
Thank you. Congratulations on your award, and thank you, and congratulations on your promotion. So when we talk about pathways for students, I think it's widely accepted and now that we know that college isn't for everyone, right? That there are other pathways for our students. And so when I think about this and when I talk about this, I talk about preparing our students in one of 3 ways. We need to prepare our students to enroll in college if that's what they choose and that's what they'd like to do. We need to prepare our students so they can be successful if they want to enlist. And then we also need to prepare our students if they want to be employed. And so kind of those 3 E's of enlist, employ, or enroll. And we need to make sure our students understand that any of those are acceptable, that there are so many high-demand fields that you can achieve regardless of whether you enroll, enlist, or be employed. And so that's something that we have looked at in the district that I'm in now. I mentioned the Access Academy as a new pathway that we are starting for our students. that will, it doesn't require them to go to college. It will have a pathway that includes some dual enrollment that can lead to an associate's degree, but it also is going to have some pathways for some IT fields. And one of the things that we came to in our district is that we have a lot of data centers around us. With our proximity to New York and to Washington, D.C., a lot of data centers have been popping up. And so what we've heard from our community and some of our businesses around us is they don't have our students coming out don't have the skills to fill some of those jobs. And so this Access Academy, some of the pathways will be focused on data center work and data center pathways, which they start out with an amazing salary and have a lot of areas to grow from there. And so we're building into that pathway. I would also say, this past year as superintendent, I helped to pass a new Health and Medical Sciences Academy pathway for our students. And as a part of that work, we held several what we called Health and Medical Sciences roundtables. We brought in members of our community. We brought in some of our hospitals. We brought in some of our doctors, some of our CNAs, some of our folks that are doing this work to talk about what should these pathways look like. And they said exactly what you said, is that they don't all have to go to college. There are some things that we can prepare students in high school that they can step right into a job and they can be effective. And so the way that we've built our Health and Medical Sciences Academy is that we will have CNA certifications where they can step right out into the workforce. We will have other certifications where they can go to a 2-year or 4-year college, or they can also go to a trade school. And so we've built some of those pathways with that in mind, that college is not the only option.
Thank you very much. We're 1 minute behind.
Sorry, Dr. Vogel, I apologize.
Okay, back to Felicia Gaines, asking the question for Lori Jarvis, who unexpectedly had to not be able to attend. So back to you, Felicia.
Good afternoon again. Felicia Gaines, again, the Chair of the NAACP Education Committee. How do you ensure equitable distribution of resources to all students throughout the district to support their academic success and reach their full potential? Can you provide examples of how you addressed resource disparities and ensured access to necessary resources for all students?
So I think part of this goes to the first question I think you asked, Ms. Gaines, that I'll refer back to in terms of when we look at differentiated staffing and differentiated support. What I will add to that is, understanding, it also goes to some of the questions around data-driven decision-making and understanding our students and understanding their needs. And so building on both of those, I'll share a couple of examples that I've been a part of. First, we had several Title I schools that were in need of some health support. And so we worked with our local hospital to develop a mobile health clinic that was able to go out and provide immunizations or provide checkups. We had a dentistry that was involved in there as well. So that's an example of how we were able to identify a need within our community, working with some of our stakeholders and get them those resources and supports. I'll say another example of going back to your question around how do you include those, how do you make sure that we have equitable opportunities for all of our students, is how we have really looked at our process for our academies. And so we have, in the past recent 2 years, we have taken a look at our academy programs in our districts and how we are selecting students into those programs and how they are open to all students, that we are removing barriers. We removed a barrier around some of the requirements with our SAT in order to get in. We removed a barrier that was requiring geometry or algebra 2 to get in, because as we looked at our curriculum and as we talked with our teachers in those programs, that those weren't really necessary, and it was blocking out students that may really want to go into those career fields and they could be very successful in those career fields. And so as we look at those equitable opportunities, we want to make sure that we're not putting up barriers to success there, but that we are creating those opportunities for any student that might want to achieve it. And so we have looked at that for our dual language immersion program. We now do a lottery process for that. We have what we call an Academies of Loudoun that has an engineering program, that has an Academy of Science program, that we use that process, has a pharmaceutical program that we now use that process. And so it has really forced us to take a look at some of our processes and procedures to make sure that we are being equitable in how we are providing opportunities and access for our students. And it's something that I think is a continued work in progress. And so we have worked with our local chapter of our NAACP to get their feedback on how we are doing and any feedback that they might be able to provide and how we can do better. We work side by side with them through that process, along with many of our other community organizations, as we look to say, which students are we missing? Which voices are we not hearing from that we need to make sure that we reach out to? Because we want to make sure that each and every one of our students can be successful. That's our job each and every day, to make sure each one of our students can be successful. And so I see Dr. Vogel is about to speak, so I'm going to cut off. I think I'm going over time.
Thank you very much. Okay, final area, safe and orderly environment, and we're going to start with Margaret Yarborough.
Good afternoon, Dr. Smith.
Hi.
I'm Margaret Yarborough, and I'm a parent representative from District 2. My question is, describe a scenario where you had to make a difficult decision regarding the enforcement of a new law or policy in order to maintain safety and order. What factors did you consider in making this decision?
A law, I'm sorry, say that question, a law or?
A law or a policy?
Or a policy.
Yeah.
I will say, I would say it's a policy. Our school district made a decision several years ago to install secure vestibules in each one of our buildings. And so that is something that we have been working on for the past several years. And they have forced some difficult decisions for us. So for example, in several of our high schools, we've got a similar, you build one school one way and you kind of replicate that model for cost savings. We have several that we had to flip. In order to make that happen, a decision by our school board, we've had to flip the entire library and main office. And so that has caused some challenges for our schools. It also caused some challenges that I had to work through with our safety and security about how we're going to do that. And when we're opening up our school and we're going through this construction process that could not take place in the summer. We were growing so fast that we didn't have other buildings we could just send students for and kind of rotate them through. And so it presented some real challenges for us that we had to work through with our safety and security, but also then talk to our parents and community about this is why we're doing this. This is a part of the process. And so I'm thankful that this upcoming summer we will have all of our safety and security vestibules installed across the district. And so that it was challenging in a number of ways. We had to work with staff. I met with several of our library media specialists to talk through that and how that was going to work, how we were going to support that with our principals that were managing some of that transition to support them. But in the end, we were able to come back together as a team. We knew there was a directive from our school board to do this, that they had put money into our capital budget to do that, and so we were able to work that to make sure that happens.
Thank you very much. Next, Tim Holly.
I'm Tim Holly. I'm a teacher from Springfield Middle School. And my question is, how do you collaborate with internal and external law enforcement agencies or departments to ensure the safety of campuses and activities within your school district? Can you provide examples of successful collaboration or initiatives that have enhanced campus safety through partnerships with law enforcement?
Thank you, Mr. Holly. Thank you for your service to our kids. I'm going to try to be short and succinct on this one if I can, because I'm going to use some very specific examples. Just recently, this past year, we instituted a blue ribbon panel that included internal and external experts around safety and security. They really looked at physical, technical security, cybersecurity, and mental health. We got the Department of Homeland Security, we had the FBI, we had our local law enforcement, and we had state agencies like the Department of Juvenile Justice and other folks that were a part of that work. We met with them several times. They were able to evaluate our processes, our protocols and procedures, and they were identify things that we did really well. And then they also identified some immediate recommendations for short and long term. And so I use that as an example to say that's one of the ways that I've recently collaborated with our local, state, and federal agencies around safety and security. Another way that I've done that is that I have worked with our local law enforcement. We have a memorandum of understanding process about how we work together. It requires us to review it every year and update it every 2 years. I've worked on that for the past 2 years to be a part of that, and as a part of that work, I meet with our local law enforcement representatives quarterly, that we talk about our relationship, how things are working, how we're working together. We had maybe they say, hey, this process didn't work very well in this one situation at this one middle school, and we can process that and work through that on how we can improve it. And so those quarterly meetings have been really helpful. And then we've also just developed those relationships over time where they know they can call me directly, and we'll have that conversation, and we'll work through if something's taking place. And so we have that type of relationship where we can just reach out and talk to one another. So I wanted to be short and succinct, but those are 2 quick examples.
Thank you very much. And now Gustavo Guzman.
Good afternoon. I'm Gustavo Guzman, teacher, biology teacher at Terry Parker High School in Duval's 2024 Teacher of the Year. My question, how do you support students and families by collaborating with school and district personnel, nonprofits, and community programs such as our Parent Academy? Can you share examples of collaborative efforts that have positively impacted student and family support services within your school district?
Okay. Thank you, Gustavo, and thank you for your service. Congratulations on your award and representing our school district. So examples of, so I referenced the Parent Academy earlier. I've been in our current district, we have something similar. And I think one of the things that we've really worked on is how do we measure our success with something like that? How do we know whether it's being successful? What are the metrics that we're using? We've actually built it into our strategic plan that our we've called it Parent Academy too, but how does our Parent Academy, how does that work? How do we make sure that our offerings are relevant? And that really it requires us to understand our community and understand the needs of our community. And so that's something that we continue to work on to make sure that really as our community continues to change, we have a very diverse community where I'm at in Loudoun County, and as our community continues to change, we need to continue to make sure that we are staying in touch with our community about some of their needs. Recently, I worked with one of our county supervisors, and they held a meeting in one of our communities just to talk with our community about what are some of your needs. They wanted to bring education to the table too as a larger conversation in our county, but we were able to have those conversations and make sure that we continue to stay in touch. And frankly, we had some areas that we identified that we weren't meeting, that we needed to go back and reflect as a team and say, how can we improve in this area for our community? And so I think it is make sure we are staying in touch. We are having those community meetings, that we are staying in touch with our community so we understand their needs so that we can provide the necessary relevant resources and supports for them. One of the things that I did as superintendent was have community listening sessions throughout our district. I held 9 of them, and as a part of an entry plan here in Duval County, I would do something much more expansive, but I think it doesn't stop there. I think it's something that needs to continue to have small group meetings to make sure that all of our voices are being heard, all of the voices in our community are being heard, and we're touching each part of our community. So I would work with our family engagement office and our community engagement office to make sure that we are intentional about where we're going out to our community, we're listening to our parents and families, that we're in touch with their needs so that we can provide the necessary resources and supports to partner with them in their child's education.
Thank you very much. And our final question will come from Travis McKee.
So between me and adjournment, I'll try to be quick. Travis McKee, I help represent District 3. I also help lead a youth leadership program through a local employer with 3 high schools, Inglewood, Atlantic Coast, and Riverside. And so as a function of that collaboration, one of the biggest heartaches that we have, frankly, as I'm sure some of the teacher colleagues here would note, buses and transportation. So my question is as follows. How do you ensure a comprehensive understanding of the various operational systems within the district, including transportation, food and nutrition services, maintenance, facilities, and other business operations? Can you describe your approach to overseeing these systems to ensure smooth operations and effective resource utilization?
So thank you for the question, Mr. McKee. So 3 ways that I would address this. First, I think it's talking with our staff and talking with our parents. I mentioned the community listening sessions, being out in our community, hearing what's bubbling up, hearing what's going well, and hearing what's concerning, and also talking with our staff is one. I think, too, it's also identifying and looking at that data and that metrics about how we're performing. I mentioned school nutrition services earlier, but I think something around maintenance that we look at is I look at our work orders. What are our work orders? What are they telling us about patterns and trends within our maintenance department and what's going on with our buildings that might be a more systemic issue? And then how quickly are we able to identify these issues to make sure that they are not having a negative impact on our schools and learning? So that would be two. And then the third way that I think it's important for us to do that is I want to be visible, and I need to be out in schools, and I need to be on buses to see how it's going, and I need to go through the cafeteria line to see the food that we're serving and how many students. So it's me as the superintendent being out there, experiencing firsthand about what our students are experiencing every day, and also having time within that to talk and listen to our students. Our students, they can tell you how we can improve. They can tell you the ways that we can get better. And so I think it's listening to our kids as well at the same time, but also being visible in those schools, being visible and experiencing some of those services to see how we're performing firsthand.
Thank you very much. We're right on schedule, and we have some time now for you to give us a wrap-up. Anything we might have missed or anything you'd like to say, Dr. Smith? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Vogel, and I'll try to be quick and brief. I'm honored to be here with you today, to be a part of this process. I think as what I bring to the table is I've served as I shared earlier, I've served as a teacher, and I've served as a principal, I've served as a chief of staff and a superintendent. And I bring all of that to this work, thinking about how we can continue to get better here. As a leader, I'm a very collaborative leader, that I try to surround myself with great people, but I also want to make sure that I'm listening to our community, listening to all of our stakeholders, our parents, listening to our students, listening to our staff, listening to our principals, about how we can continue to get better as a team. I'm also a very strong instructional leader. As a principal, I had to be that instructional leader, and I bring that now as superintendent, to be that strong instructional leader that understands what we need to do to ensure each one of our students learn. And I understand as superintendent, that is my job to make sure that that's happening each and every day for our kids. I'm also someone that comes together and tries to bring a community together that establishes trust and relationships. I've done that in superintendent in Loudoun County to reestablish some trust where we had some rough times, and to bring folks together around these issues to understand our why and why we're here and how we can work together. And finally, the last thing that I'll share that I feel like I can bring is I am somebody that comes with a fresh set of eyes. I have not worked in Florida. I come with a fresh set of eyes, working from 3 large, high-performing school districts that have done some pretty amazing things. And so I bring that to Duval County Public Schools as someone that is not a fan of doing things because that's the way they've always been done. We need to make sure we're doing what's best. And so thinking about it from that lens in terms of innovation and how we can do what's best, I bring that to this work. And so throughout my career, I've been fortunate to be able to close many achievement gaps. I've been fortunate to be able to raise graduation rates and just really think about how we can do what's best for our kids and put those things into action. And so, I hope my daughter can be an 8th grader here in Duval County Public Schools next year, being a parent, but also serving as a superintendent at the same time. And so I just appreciate you giving up part of your day to be a part of this process to make sure that you get the best superintendent for Duval County Public Schools.
Thank you. Okay, committee, if you just stay for a minute, Mr. Reichert's going to take Daniel out and get him ready for his next, the interview with the school board. And then I just want to take a moment and thank you all for your involvement today. Thank you. I just wanted to personally thank you on behalf of the Florida School Boards Association for giving up pretty much most of your day for serving on this committee. And I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of committees, but this committee has been absolutely awesome. I mean, I think the questions, and I know Mrs. Messina spent a lot of time working with y'all to make sure all those questions relate directly to school board qualities, and they're all tied to the strategic plan. I just wanted to thank all of you personally for it. If I was selecting the committee, I couldn't have done a better job. Also, I want to encourage all of you, because the board is very interested in your feedback, to provide that input from today's session, and also to continue your involvement in the process this evening by participating. And then any other information that you might have, like people that you know in those districts that these people might come from, providing that to the board. I'd like to also give you an opportunity. Are there any other questions that you might have of